مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. الصراع على السلطة في العراق بين رجل الدين الشيعي مقتدى الصدر وخصومه المتحالفين مع إيران يختبر قدرة طهران على درء صراع قد يضر بمصالحها ويزيد زعزعة استقرار الدولة الغنية بالنفط، هذا إذا ما افترضنا بعد الصدر عن إيران. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا دوغلاس أوليفانت كبير الباحثين في قضايا الأمن القومي بمؤسسة أمريكا الجديدة والمستشار السابق للرئيس السابق أو الأسبق باراك أوباما لشؤون الأمن القومي. سيد دوغلاس، مرحبا بك معنا.
My pleasure.
ما الذي يحدث في العراق وإلى أين وصلت فصول المواجهة السياسية؟
So to understand what's going on in Iraq, we actually have to go back for a few years. So the Iraqis had early elections in October of last year that were actually brought about by the Tishreen protests of 2019. So we've had a long series of protests in Iraq that brought us to early elections. Those early elections gave the Sadrists a plurality win. The Sadrists got more seats than anyone else in that election, but only about 22-23% of the seats. So they were the winners, but there are so many parties that they had to find partners to form the government with. The Sadrists were not able to get the 2/3 majority of the parliamentarians that they needed to form a government. And so Muqtada al-Sadr, in frustration, had all of his party members resign from the parliament, leaving the Sadrists with no parliamentarians and their political opponents from the Shia appointing almost all of the replacement candidates inside the parliament. So this new parliament, with the 70-some new members replacing the Sadrist seats, was about to form a government. And Mr. Sadr decided that that was unacceptable to him, and he had his followers go and camp out in the parliament building so that the parliament cannot meet and form a new government. And that is basically where we stand today.
والآن الصدر يدعو إلى حل البرلمان العراقي وإجراء انتخابات مبكرة. هل الحل في إعادة الانتخابات؟
No, it won't, because Mr. Sadr can't dissolve the parliament. Only the parliament can dissolve itself early. It requires an active parliament or it's running out its 4-year mandate. Those are the only two things that dissolve the parliament. So one political leader calling for the parliament to dissolve itself and having new elections is just a good idea from one political candidate. I sincerely doubt that that will happen in the near term. Now, might they compromise and agree to form a government that has only a 2-year mandate or a 2.5-year mandate that will dissolve itself relatively early to allow for another round of elections? Perhaps you can see a wide range of compromises that could be reached. But to directly answer your question, no, I don't think that we will see the parliament just vote to dissolve itself anytime in the near future.
هل من الممكن أن يتطور الوضع إلى نزاع مسلح، خاصة أن التيار الصدري والإطار التنسيقي اللذين يتقاسمان القاعدة الشعبية في بغداد والجنوب لديهما عشرات الآلاف من المسلحين؟
Yes, I mean, that is a very real possibility, but I think it is a remote possibility. There is a huge taboo against large-scale Shia on Shia violence. I think we would have all kinds of Shia clerics stepping in to stop that possibility. And so while low-level violence is certainly possible, we've had Shia militias killing each other, onesies, twosies for some time now. The idea of large-scale Shia on Shia violence, while possible, is, I think, pretty remote.
رئيس الوزراء العراقي مصطفى الكاظمي دعا لتشكيل لجنة تضم ممثلين عن كل الأطراف لوضع خارطة طريق للحل. كيف تقيم مبادرة الكاظمي؟
Look, I think everyone is proposing that the two sides negotiate. The only alternative to negotiating is fighting, and no one wants the fighting. So Mr. Al-Khatami is one of the many actors telling everyone they need to sit down at a table and have dialogue. The international community is saying the same thing. The UN is saying the same thing. So we can all be hopeful that that helps. On the other hand, the elections were in October. They've been having dialogue for 9 or 10 months now, and that hasn't gotten anyone anywhere. So it's unclear what another round of having a committee sitting around a table is going to accomplish.
مناصرو مقتدى الصدر في البرلمان العراقي رددوا عبارات مناوئة للتدخل الإيراني في بلادهم. ما الذي يريده الصدر؟ هل هو فعلا ضد التدخل الإيراني؟
I mean, it's too strong to say that any leader in Iraq is against Iran. Iran has a long border. There are significant ties between the two countries, long-standing ties that predate the governments or even the formation of the countries per se. So to say he's anti-Iranian is too strong. But he is the most anti-foreign leader, I think. So, yes, he's probably the most anti-Iranian figure in Iraq. But I think he's also one of the more anti-American and obviously one of the more anti-Israeli. So he's, anti almost all foreign influences in Iraq. And it's not clear that his approach is what Iraq needs, that Iraq needs to isolate itself from all its neighbors, and maybe that Iraq needs more engagement in all directions.
هل باعتقادك سحب ترشيح السوداني يمكن أن ينهي الصراع؟
I don't think this is about Sudani particularly, and so I'm not sure his withdrawing will help, and I'm not sure his withdrawal will necessarily happen. But the situation is very fluid right now, and I think that almost any outcome, any reasonable outcome, short of violence, short of some huge change of the system, is distinctly possible.
ماذا عن موقف إيران من هذه الأزمة؟
Look, I think in general, Iran wants Iraq to be kind of weak, but not terribly weak. And I think the current state of Iraqi politics is too fractured, even for the Iranians to like. So I strongly suspect that the Iranians are encouraging the Iraqis to get their act together and to try to solve the crisis. I mean, what's interesting about this crisis is that it's internal to all the ethno-sectarian groups. We're primarily talking about the Sadrists versus the coordinating framework inside the Shia. But the Kurds in the north are having the same problem between the KDP and the PUK trying to decide who will be the president. And Mohammed Halbousi, the speaker, is deeply concerned about a Sunni coalition coming together to displace him. So the interesting thing about the politics right now is that they're within the three sectarian groups rather than between the three sectarian groups.
كنت قد استبعدت المواجهة المسلحة بين ميليشيا هذه الفصائل السياسية، لكن ماذا عن سيناريو تكرار مظاهرات 2019 في بغداد وجنوبي العراق؟
The difference between now and 2019 is that this protest is just one party. It's just the Sadrists. It's not the civil society activists. It's not the democracy activists. It's not the feminist activists. This doesn't have the broad appeal that the 2019 Tishreen protests had. So right now, no, I don't think so, because it's just the Sadrists and only the Sadrists who are protesting. Now, does it have the possibility to go broader? Maybe, but I don't foresee that.
باعتقادك هل يمكن أن تؤدي الأزمة إلى اضطراب محتمل في إمدادات النفط، خاصة أن الكثير من ثروة العراق النفطية في أجزاء من البلاد ذات أغلبية شيعية؟
I don't think so. We've seen no indications of that. The oil continues to flow. Iraq is pumping right at its OPEC quota. So no, we see no particular reason to think that there'll be disruption of the oil supplies. The one exception to that, of course, is the legal dispute in the Kurdish north. But in terms of the oil coming out of the south, out of Basra and the surrounding provinces, the answer is no, no disruptions.
سؤالي الأخير عن الولايات المتحدة، كيف تنظر إلى الأزمة الحالية في العراق وهل يمكن أن تتدخل؟
I think the only way the U.S. would intervene in this crisis is if it is asked to. Where the United States asked to be an honest broker, a guarantor of a deal between various sides, I think it would be willing to step into that role. But I think the United States is out of the business of trying to impose solutions on Iraq. And we'll wait for the Iraqis to figure this out or for them to ask for our help. I don't think it will be imposed on them.
سيد دوغلاس أوليفانت، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
My pleasure. Thank you.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.